We've all had bad days, but some days are worse than others. Today I'm going to tell you about my worst day ever. It all started out with a toothache. It was the kind of toothache that felt like someone was constantly hammering a nail right into my tooth. I called up the dentist, but he wasn't able to schedule me until Monday, and it was currently Friday, and so I had to endure the weekend. Well, Monday came and I had asked for the day off from work. And I went out to my car and I reached into my pocket. But my keys were not there. I had accidentally locked them in my house. And so I walked around my house and I realized that the only way into my house was to remove the window air conditioner unit. And so I lifted up on it and I pulled it out. And I walked through my window. I found my keys on my couch and I went out to my car and I started driving down the highway. Now my dentist is a good 30 miles away and I was 20 miles into my journey when I saw flashing lights behind me. A 7-foot tall highway patrolman with a long beard came to my window and he asked me, "Do you know why I have pulled you over?" I said, "No, I have no idea." "You don't realize you are leaking gasoline all over the highway?" I said, "No, I had no idea." He said, "Well, you'd best step out of your vehicle and we best check this out." And so I got out of my car and we walked to the back of my car and he knelt down and he got a great big whiff of gasoline. "This is a major environmental offense," he said. "We must go back and see where all this started." And so we walked back the 2 miles to where the trail started. And on the highway, right there, was a bullet. He picked up the bullet and handed it to me, and I flinched back, thinking that it might be hot. But instead, it was freezing cold. I was completely bewildered, but he was not. "I've seen this before," he said. "A hunter will be out in the woods, and he will be shooting at a deer, and it will be so cold out that bullet will freeze in mid-air. And then at a later date it will unthaw, and it will continue at its previous velocity. And your tank just happened to be in its path." Well, I wasn't sure if this was what had happened, but I was in no position to argue with a highway patrolman. Well, the officer was mighty proud of himself, and he got out a cigar and he started to light it. But his beard started on fire as apparently it had gotten into the gasoline. He brushed it off and he dropped it right onto the highway, right onto that gasoline, and it started the trail on fire. And that officer went running right into the line of fire. I moved to the side and ran beside the fire because I didn't want to get burned. Well, we were almost up to my car, and I yelled, "Stop! It's gonna blow!" And he stopped, and sure enough, my car started on fire and exploded with parts of it landing in the neighboring field, starting it on fire. Well, his car, it was right behind mine. And it also started on fire and it exploded. And parts of it landed on the other side of the highway, starting it on fire. Now at this point, you might think that this story could not get any worse. However, it did. You see, there was a car coming in the opposite direction. It was able to avoid all of the debris, but it was not able to avoid this frog. You see, out of nowhere came this frog. It jumped onto the roof of the car, and then it launched itself right at me, hitting me in the head, rendering me unconscious. When my head hit the pavement, my tooth fell out, and it became lodged in my throat. So now I was both unconscious, and I couldn't breathe. The officer looked over and radioed in. "I think we're going to need an ambulance also." He came over and started doing CPR on me, and as he was pushing on my chest, my tooth dislodged. But he didn't know it. He came up to breathe into my mouth so fast, that tooth flew into his mouth and went down his throat and lodged in his throat, and he collapsed on top of me. And that's when the local paparazzi showed up. You know, the people that are always listening to their scanner radios to find out what's going on, so that they can be the first ones to the scene to report their version of the story, and so that they can post on Facebook, Snapchat, and Chitter. Well, I may have just invented a new social network there. But after that, the police came to close down the highway. The ambulance came and took myself and the highway patrolman to the hospital, and we were fine. The fire trucks came and they put out the fires. But even this is not the worst part of my story. You see, my insurance company claimed that this was all my fault. All $500,000 of damages. And I only had a $300,000 policy. Now this is where you, the judges, come in. You see, I need your help. Because I need to get entered into this contest. And I need to be in the top 10. Because I need to win this contest so that I can help pay for my lawyer, as my lawyer and I try and prove that it was not my fault, not the deer hunter's fault, not the deer's fault, but the ammunition manufacturer's fault for creating a bullet that could freeze in mid-air. Thank you for considering my story in the Missouri Liars Contest.